So I decided to do a video dealing with the Batman Off-World miniseries for two reasons. Firstly, it's a pretty good miniseries that may just have some important ramifications in Batman lore. The second reason is that there were delays in releasing the books. It's a 6-issue series that has taken almost a year and a half to be released in its entirety. The 6th issue has just come out, while the 5th one came out 5 or 6 months ago, and I feel that these delays have robbed the series of its momentum. This might be remedied when the trade is released, but at the moment it feels like the series isn't as successful as it could have been. An almost third reason is that I think that there might be some readers who would like a recap. To those I say, please stop watching when I get to the point you read up to. I mean, if you intend to read the rest. If not, well, you can find out what happens here. So let's start. Okay, so we all know the story. One dark night after watching The Mark of Zorro, young Bruce Wayne and his parents leave the movie cinema and, while walking home, take a shortcut through a dark alley. There they are held up by a gunman, and things take a tragic turn. Bruce is left orphaned. The trauma causes him to withdraw into himself. Feeling lonely and hopeless, he decides to spend his life waging war on criminals. But Bruce is a clever child. He knows that he must prepare himself for such an endeavour. That, if he is not prepared, the criminals will tear him to pieces. But that's okay, because Bruce is also patient and determined. Arguably more determined than any other fictional character. So much so that, in time, and in a world filled with flying demigods and bulletproof aliens, this determination is the superpower that undoes the plans of world domination of more supervillains than any other. But we are not there yet. We are still with the boy. The intelligent and determined boy. He decides that to prepare he must learn everything he can about crime fighting. So he focuses on this pursuit at the expense of all others, spending his days studying anything relevant he can find. Excelling in school subjects that further this pursuit, while giving no attention to those that don't. Learning all he can from his new legal guardian, his butler, Alfred, a vastly experienced man who spent time in the British Special Forces, and as an army medic. And when he is old enough and has learnt all he can from those at home, he sets out into the world, learning all he can there too, from the outside world itself, but also from those skilled teachers within it. Fortunately he is wealthy, his parents having left him billions, so he can buy that tutelage when it is for sale. When it isn't, well, as I've said, he's intelligent and determined, and many of those not interested in money still want to pass on what they know to someone so gifted, to the ultimate student. So he learns, absorbing the skills from the world's greatest warriors and thinkers and thieves. And when he has learnt enough, everything from martial arts to assassination to magic and ventriloquism, Bruce returns home and becomes the ultimate crime fighter, the Batman. This story, or a variation on it, has been told numerous times, in comic books, in films, on TV. But Jason Aaron saw that there was a gap in Batman's initial training, that it wasn't as comprehensive as I'd imagined. The story of Batman Off-World starts in Space Sector 0909, the Slag galaxy. It's the first time the sector has ever been mentioned in DC's continuity, so we don't know it. We are told it's 8 megaparsecs from Earth, which is far, a little more than 26 million light-years away. That isn't the edge of the observable universe or anything, but is still very far. To give you some idea, there are about 100 galaxies within a single megaparsec of Earth. So it's not surprising that this is an area that's never been mentioned. We see a giant spaceship hauling a much smaller one on board. We hear voices from the larger ship, over their radios, say that they have detected one life form on the smaller vessel. Once the smaller ship is secured, soldiers are sent to investigate. This whole thing is very much like any number of science fiction films, where humans make contact with some sort of alien ship, with something unknown. But this is where expectations are turned on their head, as we discover that the occupant of the ship isn't an alien, it's Batman. While the soldiers, yes, definitely aliens. This reversal of roles continues as Batman strikes out from the shadows, taking out the soldiers and then the ship's robot protectors. This last bit he does with a picked-up chainsaw. So, in the space of a few pages, the story has gone from an inverted alien movie to a typical scene of Batman swiftly dispatching a gang of foes. But that doesn't last for long. These aren't typical hired thugs he's dealing with. The two soldiers are already back on their feet, Even more daunting, the captain of the ship, who's named Syyn, arrives. He's huge, dwarfing Batman. We later learn that he's Akkarian, an alien race I haven't heard of. I think, like the Slag galaxy, this could be their first appearance. Batman punches him with everything he has, which includes a 10,000-volt discharge from the tech gauntlet he's wearing. We don't see any more of the fight. Just Batman waking up in the ship's brig, with a shattered nose, 4 broken ribs, a dislocated hip, and a cracked orbital bone. He's surrounded by alien prisoners. One of them, a female Thanagarian named Ione, who seems to be the top dog amongst the prisoners, stops the others from harming our hero. Thanagarian. That's the alien race Starfire of the Titans belongs to. So we know more about them than we do about the Akkarians. Mostly that they are able to absorb stellar radiation, somewhat like Superman can do with the radiation of a yellow sun. And this energy grants them super strength, speed, durability, and the ability to fly. They are also able to learn languages, simply by touching people they want to be able to speak to. Starfire typically kisses another to understand them, but this is a personal choice, and pretty much any touch works. I don't know what method Ione uses though, because when Batman questions how he is able to understand her, she says that a translator chip was put into him when he was unconscious. Which is good to know, not only because it stops the reader wondering whether or not Ione partook in some mild sexual assault while he was out, but mainly because we don't need to wonder why everyone is speaking English 8 megaparsecs from England. As for the question of whether Ione lacks some of her powers, because she's imprisoned in cells with no windows, we're never told. She seems pretty chatty otherwise, inviting Batman to be a part of the escape she's planning. It's an offer he refuses, and we learn that, despite everything that's happened to him, he's right where he wants to be. And that he paid over $500 million to Star Labs for an experimental shuttle to get him there. So what's going on? We learn that all of this happens pretty early on in Bruce's career as Batman, little more than a year in. We also see the events that triggered his voyage. Batman was doing what Batman does, beating up criminals. In this case, a group called the East End Irish Mob. And he was doing a pretty good job. This is, after all, what he spent all those years training to do. But, close to victory, things turned against our hero, because the mob had hired a new enforcer, an Akkarian. Not Syyn, the Akkarian captain of the ship, but still a pretty big and intimidating Akkarian. And it just cleaned Batman's clock. The fight wasn't even close. Not even close to being close. This is when Batman realized that all his training had been directed against earthly threats, but that there is a much bigger universe out there that he was totally unprepared for. So, he adapted what he had done before. Instead of going into the wider world to see for himself how it works, and to become what he needs to overcome those who would shape it for their own immoral ends, he would venture into the wider universe. He is here, in Sector 0909, to learn, to grow into what he must to protect Gotham from the alien horrors that dwell in the dark corners of DC's universe. Back on the alien ship, which is called the Warstorm because it's surrounded by an artificially created stellar hurricane. I'm not sure exactly what a stellar hurricane is, but it makes the Warstorm inescapable. Which is a good thing from Syyn's perspective, because he goes around the galaxy abducting anyone he can find, and training them to become mercenaries. Not Batman, though. Syyn decides he's too puny for training, so instead he cleans up the place, carts things around, and does those dangerous tasks that could get the doer killed. Basically becomes a sort of expendable space janitor, which seems to suit him fine as he's generally left alone. As for the danger, Batman views just surviving as his training. Anyway, one of his jobs is to dispose of combat training robots that are too damaged to be repaired. He befriends one of these. Well, befriends to the extent one can become friends with a robot who is programmed to feel joy at being punched. He fixes it up so that it can tell him everything in its database about combating alien races, everything it has learned while being a punching bag for them. Fixes it up so that he can spar against it, with it fighting in the styles of various aliens. The robot warns that this exercise will be painful, but, as previously mentioned, Bruce is determined. Ione later helps with his training too. She was something called a storm chaser. Basically that's a bounty hunter in the employ of the same people who pay Syyn, whose job it was to hunt for escaped war recruits. so she knows a thing or two about fighting. She's a prisoner now, sentenced to death, because on one of her missions she fell in love with her quarry, after capturing him and spending time with him while transporting him back. Well, she's not a prisoner for that exactly, because she still returned him. He died soon afterwards, which led to her helping other prisoners escape. And that's why she's a prisoner now. But she's strong-willed and independent for a prisoner, and she likes Batman despite them disagreeing on just about everything, so she helps him train. I'm not sure how long the state of affairs lasts. Long enough for Batman to learn what he thinks he needs to. Long enough to survive 5 trips to the storm stacks, the giant engines that power the ship's stellar hurricanes. This is a task that's so dangerous that there is no record of anybody else surviving even 2. But he survives, and he helps others do the same. In one case, this help he gives gets him into trouble, first by getting him into a fight with the Branks, a giant 4-armed alien with skin as hard as stone, when he wants to kill a weaker prisoner. Batman defeats it. He is trained to fight the Branks. But this particular Branks has friends. Batman is trained to fight them too. The Gardanians and the Thorgars and the Flaxians, but there are dozens of them. And so, even though he makes a good account of himself, eventually he goes down and lands himself in the cells again. Ione is there too, having been discovered stealing worm rum. What exactly that is isn't the important bit. What is that she's discovered that with Bruce saving everyone, the war storm has become overcrowded. Syyn, being the caring captain that he is, has decided to solve this problem by just ejecting those he doesn't see value in, Batman and Ione included, into space. This news forces Batman to act. Fortunately, he's Batman, so breaking out of the cells is no big deal. Neither is breaking out the other prisoners, or dealing with the guards on the way to Ione's ship, which is being stored in the War Storm's hangar. What is a big deal is shutting down the stellar hurricane. Batman has sent the punchbot to the control room to handle it. There it comes into conflict with the weathermen, small bloated slug-like people with withered limbs who control the hurricane. Punchbot punches them, which, given its name, might not seem surprising. But the truth is that it's called that because its job was to be punched. It's never punched back until Batman arrived. Anyway, so Punchbot punches and disables the hurricane, but gets shot in the process, so he doesn't meet the others in the hangar. Batman, still being Batman, rushes to save him. The others wait for as long as they can before departing. Meanwhile, Batman comes face to face with Syyn. The fight goes better, but not well. Far from well. Batman holds his own for a while, but eventually is overpowered and tossed into space. Before he dies, an escape pod is launched from the war storm. It seems the punchbot, still injured and trapped on board, launched it. Batman grabs onto it. I assume he gets into it too. That isn't shown. But the next scene is Batman arriving on Akkari, Syyn's homeworld. Or home moon, I suppose. Because Akkari is a moon. The punchbot, knowing that's where he wanted to go, programmed the escape pod to take him there. The moon isn't much like I thought it would be. Both Syyn and the Akkarian Batman fought when he was back in Gotham are huge, intimidating creatures. So you'd somehow think that they would have come from a world that was huge and intimidating too. But this one isn't. If anything, it's sad. Pathetic in the true meaning of the word. The people living there, the Akkarians, are pathetic too. Years under the heels of an organization called the Blakksun Mining Company has crushed any vigor the Akkarians may have once had. The company has enslaved the people, kidnapped their children, and stolen everything valuable before moving on to the next world. So now, all that those who remain wish for is death, which comes, as often as not, from the great barbed wolves who prey upon them. Batman can't help with most of that. These evils are too large, too entrenched for him to solve. But he thinks he can do something about the wolves. So he goes to their cave and challenges their leader, their alpha. And before someone in the comments says that the wolves don't actually have alphas, these are space wolves, and Batman says they do. So I'm going to believe him. We don't see the fight. We learn that it lasted hours, and while Batman didn't defeat the beast, he did gain its respect. So the barbed wolves won't hunt the Akkarians anymore. Also, the alpha, thinking that there will be good hunting if it sticks with Batman, follows him off-world, off-moon, whatever. Something it can now do because Ione has come looking for Bruce. The trio spends weeks hiding from the Warstorm and Syyn on Ione's ship. He's on their tail because he has a point to prove, that there's no escaping. And Batman wants him there, on his trail, because he has some points to prove too. That he has learnt what he needs to. That he can defeat Syyn. That he is now prepared enough to beat others like him, if and when they show up in Gotham. The only reason that he has been running is that he needs some time to prepare, which takes the form of both healing and of building a new costume, one that's capable of withstanding the rigours of both stellar hurricanes and the battle to come. When he's ready, he stops running. He launches himself from Ione's ship and through the hurricane. His new armour works, or it has so far, so he manages to get on board Syyn's ship. And then, in a very Batman fashion, he deals with those mercenaries on board, who try to stop him from opening the hangar so Ione can land on board too. This makes two things clear. The first is that his new armour is working with this task too. The second is that Batman has grown as a warrior since this whole thing started. He's now up to the task of defeating aliens, and these are very highly trained aliens. And he's capable of defeating them when they have the home ground advantage. So he routs the guards and lets Ione in. He then takes the barbed wolf with him as he ventures further into the ship, in search of Syyn. Meanwhile, more guards come for Ione. She doesn't fight them. Instead, she gives them the opportunity to escape the Warstorm, saying that when she goes, they can come with. It's an opportunity they all take. Back to Batman. Syyn attacks. The first thing he does is take out the wolf. He takes it by surprise. Even so, it's not much of a fight. It's then just him and Batman. The fight we've been waiting for. And it's a hard one. In the end, Batman wins. Third time's a charm, I guess. His training and his preparation have paid off. He's now the Batman we all know. The one who can stand side by side with titans like Superman and Wonder Woman, as their equal as they battle alien threats. But he's not quite ready to go home, even though he's now accomplished what he set out to. His conscience won't allow it. It won't allow him to turn tail and leave this galaxy he's in, to the Blakksun mining company. The people who devastated Akkari. The people who, we discover, Syyn works for, and so are responsible for all the misery he, and I assume hundreds of others like him, have wrought. I will admit that I was momentarily against this move. I don't mean on Batman's part. He's a hero and he's acting heroically, so there's nothing to complain about there. I mean that I was against this move from James Aaron, the writer of the miniseries. Up until this point, the series had a definite focus that differentiated it from other Batman stories. It dealt with Batman learning to fight aliens. That's a pretty clear storyline. But then, going after generic baddie aliens just felt like it muddied the waters a bit. It detracted from the clear story a bit. It took this unique story and made it the same as 100 others. I say momentarily, I'm still slightly against it. But what helped is discovering who the heads of the Blakksun mining company are. The Blakksun twins. Lady Wrath, who is large and physical and brutal, and her twin, Lord Whisper, who acts in the background and looks physically stunted. But he has a trick up his sleeve. A word from him causes death, and it looks like a very painful death. In fact, it's a word from him that gets rid of Syyn after the twins learn of his defeat. Both Wrath and Whisper seem emotionless, robotic almost, like they're forces of nature, above caring about what others think, like they're pure evil. They are both also visually arresting. They look like they could have stepped out of a Hellraiser film. That might well have been part of the inspiration for them, because Pinhead and the other Cenobites have the same pure evil force of nature vibe that the twins have. I don't know if all of that is a long-term recipe for success as a Batman foe, but it worked pretty well for the last few issues of the series. Anyway, so Batman is working against them, taking out their facilities and freeing those they've kidnapped. He has the Alpha Barbed Wolf with him, and the Punch Robot, because he has commandeered the Warstorm and is using it to wage his war. Ione is there too, to start with anyway, She and Batman had some sort of romantic relationship, the details of which aren't completely clear. But it seems she loves him and wants him to abandon his mission, because it'll get him killed. He can't do that. Both freeing the Slayer galaxy from the Blakksuns and returning to Gotham are too important to him, are too much a part of him, for him to abandon them and go with her. She's aware of this, and so she leaves. Okay, so back to manly superhero stuff. The Blakksuns hire this guy, who shares their striking red and white color scheme, to capture Batman. Like Ione, he's a storm chaser, a galactic bounty hunter. But he's bad, ethically. He's wanted for murder and other crimes throughout the universe. As far as skill goes, he's good, one of the best. So good that he tracks Batman down almost immediately. He's called the Thanagarian, so he's the same race as Hawkman, and a bit of a rip-off of the Mandalorian. That's about all we know about him. Well, that, and that the thrill of the hunt is all that keeps him going. That without it, he would step off the edge of a cliff. Before I continue, I'm going to go on a tangent here, but it'll be quick. When I initially saw the Blacksun twins, my first thought was that they reminded me of the artwork of Gerald Brom. He's a gothic dark fantasy artist who's been around for more than 30-something years. The pale skin, the vibrant reds, the masks, it all seems very him. Seems Hellraiser too. I'm not distancing myself from that point. In fact, Brom also feels Hellraiser-ish. So all three I find dark and gothic, but with an elegance I can't quite put my finger on. And when the Thanagarian was introduced, well, he reminded me of Brom's work even more, because more pale skin, more red, and more masks. I don't know whether the twins are actually wearing masks. They're probably not. But that's the aesthetic. Okay, so you could well be saying, big whoop. Who cares if there's a passing resemblance between these characters and the work of some artist? And that's fair. But I just want to point out two little facts that could indicate that Brom's art was, in fact, an inspiration. The first is a minor one. One of the fantasy characters Brom has drawn is Michael Moorcock's Elric. And Elric's magic sword is Stormbringer. Stormbringer, Storm Chaser, War Storm. Is that all a coincidence? Well, yes, probably. So how about my second piece of evidence? In the early 1990s, Dungeons & Dragons released a new setting, and they hired Gerald Brom to do most of the prominent artwork for it. And the name of that setting? Darksun. And these twins are the Blakksuns. Also, Blacksun mining strips away the world's natural resources, until those worlds are barren wastelands, much like the world in Darksun, whose resources were stripped by magic. Probably also a stretch, but I thought I'd mention it. Okay, tangent over. Batman is in the middle of a heated battle with the Blacksun's Comet Bomber Corps. He's in a spaceship he refuses to call the Warbat, which is basically a space bat plane. When an enemy approaches faster than the others, it smashes through the bat plane and drags Batman out in one motion, and we see that it's the Thanagarian. There is then the mother of all slobberknockers between these two. It starts in the void of space. Batman is protected from the elements, or more technically the lack of elements, by his suit. The Thanagarian by the nth metal covering him, and they just go at it. The fight is more brutal than the one against Syyn, lasting most of the 5th issue. They punch and they kick. Batman even somehow rigs one of the Comet Bomber's homing signal to cause the craft to smash into the Thanagarian. Impact doesn't even slow him down, which makes him seem more powerful than Hawkman. Anyway, then they crash into the War Storm, and the fight continues. All the while, the Wolf and the Punchbot are defending the ship against the other attackers. In the end, Batman gets the Punchbot to route the Storm Shield through the circuits of Batman's armor. I don't know how this works, but it does. Batman then punches his foe, and all that energy is released, knocking the Thanagarian out. But not for long. Now out of his armor, the bounty hunter wakes up and wants to continue the fight. Batman doesn't indulge him. Instead, he traps him on the War Storm with an army of Punchbots, who want to do nothing but fight, while he, and by that I mean Batman, and Punchbot Prime, and the Wolf hightail it out of there, and into another Batplane. While all of this has been going on, the Blacksuns have been busy. They visited a moon cluster that's in rebellion because Batman's actions have convinced the residents that there is a better life for them than being slaves. The Blacksuns disagree, but instead of reasoning with the rebels, or even using violence to crush the rebellion. They make an example of the moons. Lady Wrath rips and tears at the rebels, killing many, but it is Lord Whisper who really does the damage. He whispers to a few, driving them mad and violent, so they attack their fellows. Worse, this madness is contagious, so it spreads, soon blanketing the whole moon system, killing everyone. 13 billion dead. Hearing this, Batman realizes how out of his depth he is. He considers abandoning his mission, thinking that he's doing far more harm than good. But he doesn't get the chance. Instead, he is approached by Ione. Now, I haven't mentioned this before, but we knew that she was tracking Batman after having left him. She overheard that the Thanagarian was after him, and so she got on their trail. She'd arrived on the Warstorm just after Batman had left, and had found the Thanagarian still engaged in battle against the Punchbots. She then seems to have taken him out. The assumption was that she was protecting Batman by doing what he wasn't prepared to do. This assumption proved false, however, because when she meets Batman on one of the moons of that decimated cluster, it isn't so that she can help him. Instead, it's so that she can collect on his bounty. So she shoots him and knocks him unconscious, and then delivers him to the Blakksuns. Except that we soon learn that this betrayal wasn't a betrayal at all. Batman needed a way to get to the Blakksuns. And what way is simpler than just being delivered right to their door? So he planned with Ione that she would be the delivery lady. Okay, so the plan is simple, but it's not without risk. A huge amount of risk, as Batman is now shackled before both of the Blakksun twins, two of the most powerful and evil beings in the galaxy. So, like at the start of the series, he's right where he wants to be, but that doesn't mean he isn't about to die horribly. And the twins go about making that death happen, with Lord Whisper whispering right into Batman's ear. Batman resists, his training and that determination I mentioned at the start being enough for him to endure. Though his eyes bleed and his ears bleed, and he feels every part of himself start to shut down, he endures. The Blakksun's advisors don't. Though Whisper's words weren't directed at them, and although they are standing some distance from where he spoke, they all died. Seeing this, Wrath wants to do away with the whispering, and just rip Batman apart with her bare hands. But an alarm informs her that his three allies are attacking the base, so she goes to deal with them while her brother finishes the job. But he doesn't finish the job. Instead, Batman sees frustration flash across the villain's face. This momentary crack in the perceived invulnerability of the twin is enough for Batman to sit up and do something nobody has ever done. He whispers back. He tells Whisper who he is, what he's overcome, what he's prepared to overcome to end the Blakksun's reign. His words, combined with the disbelief that Batman is still alive, are enough to break Whisper. Meanwhile, Wrath is up against the trio of Ione, Punchbot, and the Wolf. They attack her with everything they have, but even that is not enough to take her down. However, Batman appears, and that's enough to rob her of her confidence. So when he enters the fray, the fight is soon done. The Blakksuns are thrown into a cell together. Whisper is in a stupor. As I said, Batman broke him. But he's still mumbling, and these mumbles are enough to subdue his sister. So now it's happy ending time. The Blakksun Mining Company is dissolved, its slaves are freed, and the planets it rules are now autonomous again. All of which means that it's time for Batman to leave. But he leaves on good terms with Ione. Once back in Gotham, he has a rematch with the Akkarian employed by the Irish mob. Again, the fight isn't close, but this time in Batman's favour. Okay, that homecoming probably wasn't too surprising. Satisfying but expected. What's probably less expected is the legacy Batman left in the Slag galaxy. Yes, obviously bringing down such a ruthless regime is a legacy in itself. But more than that, he left his three allies, and they're continuing his work, springing into action when the bat signal lights up a moon. The Punchbot now calls itself Batbot. The Barbed Wolf wears a bat dog tag. And Ione is dressed so like Batman, one could imagine she's auditioning for the role of Batwoman. So 3 new members of the Bat family that are fulfilling a role the Bat family never really had, keeping order in the distant reaches of space. So a perfect launching pad for more adventures. But that's as far as this series goes. And it's more than enough for this video. So goodbye, thanks for watching, and hope to see you next time.